You're going to fall asleep to horror tonight. Sounds counterintuitive, right? Most people assume scary stories keep you awake, hearts racing, checking under the bed, convinced every shadow holds something watching back. But here's the thing about horror, the kind we're diving into tonight anyway. It's not designed to make you jump. It's designed to make you drift. The SCP Foundation documentation reads like found footage feels. Clinical reports describing impossible things in bureaucratic language. Redacted sections that suggest horrors too terrible to name, but somehow, paradoxically, those missing details let your mind fill gaps with whatever level of terror you can actually handle tonight. And tonight, you probably can't handle much. You're tired. Your brain wants patterns, repetition, something steady enough to follow into sleep, but interesting enough to distract from whatever stress kept you scrolling until this ungodly hour. That's where analog horror lives, in the space between engaging and exhausting. Traditional horror comes at you. Jump scares, sudden violence, screaming victims running from chainsaw-wielding maniacs. That's adrenaline horror, designed for movie theaters and Halloween haunts. Analog horror? Analog horror waits. It sits in the corner of your vision like static on a dead channel. It hums at frequencies just below conscious awareness. It presents as warning labels on VHS tapes found in your grandmother's attic. Grainy footage of empty hallways that seem too long, broadcasts that shouldn't exist but somehow made it to your television at 3 in the morning when you fell asleep with the TV on. The SCP Foundation accidentally became the internet's largest collection of analog horror before the term even existed. Thousands upon thousands of clinical reports describing anomalies, entities, places, and phenomena that break reality's rules. Each one presented with detached professionalism, as if documenting Lovecraftian nightmares was just another day at the office, which for Foundation personnel, it literally is. That juxtaposition creates unease more effectively than any monster ever could. Consider SCP-001, not the entity itself, but the fact that multiple SCP-001s exist simultaneously. The Gate Guardian, the Factory, the Spiral Path. 36 proposals, each claiming to be the first anomaly ever contained, each contradicting the others completely. The Foundation says this ambiguity is intentional. Maybe all 36 are real. Maybe none are. Maybe the real SCP-001 is the narrative instability itself. That's analog horror. The uncertainty, the contradictions, the sense that even the people documenting these things don't fully understand what they're dealing with. You don't need to understand it either. That's the comfort. When you read about SCP-682, the hard-to-destroy reptile, you're not expected to solve it. Foundation personnel have been trying to kill this thing since before you were born. They've thrown it into the sun, submerged it in acid, erased it from existence on conceptual levels. It keeps coming back, regenerating, adapting, surviving. Your brain doesn't have to work overtime figuring out solutions because the experts already failed. You just observe, listen. Let the steady rhythm of incident reports and termination attempts wash over you like waves. Analog horror works as sleep content because it operates on dream logic. Things happen without explanation. Time moves strangely. People react with inappropriate calm to impossible situations. The Foundation's clinical documentation style mirrors how dreams feel when you try explaining them the next morning. Matter-of-fact descriptions of nonsensical events. The subject spontaneously manifested 37 additional fingers, at which point staff administered standard anxiolytics and rescheduled testing for Thursday. That sentence could be from a dream journal or a Foundation report. The line blurs, the format matters too. VHS tracking errors, analog television snow, radio static. These textures trigger specific nostalgia in certain age groups. If you grew up in the 80s or 90s, you remember falling asleep to television static after the national anthem played and stations signed off for the night. That white noise meant safety, meant home, meant your parents were nearby and tomorrow was Saturday morning cartoons. Analog horror hijacks that comfort, weaponizes nostalgia into unease, but never quite eliminates the underlying safety of the familiar format. You can't stream analog horror, not really. Sure, you're listening to this on a digital platform, but the content mimics analog's limitations. Grainy footage, distorted audio. The sense that you're watching something recorded decades ago, found in a storage unit, uploaded by someone who doesn't quite understand what they've discovered. That distance creates safety. Whatever horror exists in the footage already happened. You're just observing the aftermath, far removed from any actual danger. The SCP Foundation's documentation style amplifies this distance. Everything's already contained, already classified, already studied by scientists who wrote reports in passive voice and submitted them to oversight committees. By the time you're reading about SCP-3008, the infinite IKEA, it's already been thoroughly explored. Staff already know the survival strategies. The Foundation already maintains observation posts at all primary entrances. The immediate crisis passed years ago. You're just reading the file, safe in bed, drifting towards sleep while learning about an endless furniture store staffed by hostile employees who dismantle shoppers for building materials after the lights go out. See how that works? Terrifying concept. Delivered with bureaucratic detachment, already resolved from a documentation standpoint. Your brain processes the horror, but also the safety. You're not in the IKEA. You're not even in the same reality as the IKEA. You're listening to someone describe the IKEA, which is like hearing about someone else's nightmare. Interesting, slightly unsettling, ultimately harmless to you specifically. That's the magic of analog horror as sleep content. It engages the part of your brain that loves patterns and mysteries while simultaneously reassuring the anxiety centers that you're perfectly safe. Nothing in these stories can reach you. They're contained, documented, classified, filed away in some impossible archive that exists outside normal reality. The Foundation locks monsters in boxes so you don't have to worry about them. All you have to do is listen to the reports, let the words flow past like a documentary about deep-sea creatures or the formation of galaxies. Horror for sleep works because it crowds out other fears. The real anxiety keeping you awake, work stress, relationship problems, financial worries, existential dread about climate change or political instability, those fears are nebulous, undefined. They could be anything, which makes them everything, which makes them impossible to mentally escape. But a specific horror story? That's contained. That has boundaries. That begins and ends. Your brain can wrap around it, examine it, then set it aside when the story concludes. SCP Analog Horror especially excels at this because of its encyclopedic nature. The Foundation's database contains thousands of SCPs. You could spend years reading files and never run out of content. That abundance creates a different relationship with the material. You're not watching a single horror movie with a finite runtime. You're exploring an infinite library of the impossible. If one entry disturbs you too much, you move to the next. The variety prevents fixation, while the consistency of format creates comforting familiarity. And let's acknowledge the elephant in the room. You're using horror to fall asleep, which society considers weird. People who learn this about you probably react with confusion or concern. Doesn't that give you nightmares, they ask, genuinely baffled. But they don't understand how horror functions for those of us who grew up on it. Horror was never about being scared. Horror was about externalizing internal fears, giving them shape and name, then watching them be defeated or contained, or at least understood. The SCP Foundation represents humanity's attempt to impose order on chaos, to study the unstudyable, to contain the uncontainable, to protect reality from things that shouldn't exist but do anyway. That mission resonates with anyone who's ever felt overwhelmed by a world that makes less sense the more you learn about it. The Foundation can't eliminate all anomalies, can't solve every problem, can't save everyone, but they try. They document, they maintain protocols, they secure, contain, protect. And somehow that desperate attempt at order in the face of cosmic chaos becomes deeply comforting. So tonight, for the next 2 hours, you're going to hear about places that shouldn't exist, entities that break physics, phenomena that defy explanation, and people who document all of it with the same energy as accountants filing tax returns. You're going to drift through infinite hallways, witness broadcasts from dead worlds, explore spaces between spaces where reality thins like old fabric. And somehow, impossibly, you're going to sleep. Because at the end of it all, analog horror offers something precious. It offers proof that even in the face of incomprehensible horror, humans adapt. We create protocols. We build containment. We write reports. We keep working through the weird until it becomes routine. And if Foundation personnel can face reality-bending entities with nothing but clipboards and determination, maybe you can face tomorrow. The static's already starting, isn't it? That familiar hum, the sense that you're settling into something. Good. Let it happen. We've got 2 hours of comfortable dread ahead, and every minute of it is designed to help you stop thinking, stop worrying, and finally rest. Let's begin with the places, the empty spaces, the liminal zones where reality forgets to finish rendering. You're in a furniture store. Nothing unusual about that. Big box retail, fluorescent lights humming overhead, arrows on the floor guiding you through the showroom maze. Living rooms transition into kitchens, transition into bedrooms, transition back into living rooms because the store wants you walking past maximum merchandise. Standard retail psychology. Except the arrows stop making sense. You turn left where you remember turning right before. The bedroom section appears twice, 3 times. You haven't seen an exit in maybe 15 minutes, which seems long, but you weren't paying attention to time, were you? That's how it starts, with not paying attention, with assuming you know where you are because it looks familiar. SCP-3008 is what happens when familiarity becomes hostile. The Foundation calls it the infinite IKEA, though it's not specifically IKEA, just resembles the format enough that everyone understands the reference. Large furniture store, Scandinavian aesthetics, cheap but functional furnishings, affordable home goods, restaurant serving meatballs. Except this one has no exits. The entrance doors you walked through, they're the only way in, but they're not a way out. Step inside, and you're in the store. Forever, unless you die. Then you're still in the store, just not conscious for it anymore. The showroom floor spans thousands of square kilometers, possibly infinite, possibly expanding. The Foundation isn't certain because mapping infinity presents logistical challenges. What they know for sure is the layout changes. Sections rearrange. New departments appear overnight. Staff inside have explored for years without finding boundaries. Just more showroom floor, more warehouse sections, more lighting displaying rooms, more cafeterias, more everything. The store that contains all stores. During the day, it's almost pleasant. Almost. Bright fluorescent lights, comfortable furniture you can sit on, beds you can sleep in, restaurants serving edible food that replenishes overnight somehow. Survivors established communities, built shelters from furniture, organized supply chains scavenging the infinite merchandise, created something resembling civilization from flat-pack particle board. Humans adapt, right? Throw us in an endless IKEA and we'll create society anyway, because that's what we do. Form committees, establish rules, build houses from bookcases and dining tables. Then night comes. The lights don't turn off exactly. They dim, shift toward yellow-gray. The shadows lengthen wrong, angles bending in ways fluorescent lighting shouldn't produce, and the staff emerges. Hostile staff, humanoid figures wearing store uniforms, faces hidden or absent, depending on who's describing them. They hunt, dismantle anyone caught outside shelter zones, use the parts for store maintenance apparently. Survivors hear screaming during night hours. Find blood in showroom sections that should be clean. Discover people they knew reduced to components. Stored in warehouse shelving like excess inventory. The Foundation maintains observation posts at the store's entrance locations. Multiple entrances exist across reality, all leading to the same interior. Sites include cities in different countries, different continents, even different time periods based on testing. Walk into SCP-3008 in London, you might encounter someone who entered in Tokyo, or Moscow, or Lagos, or Des Moines, all trapped together in the same infinite retail hell. Rescue operations focus on entrance zones. Foundation personnel stage raids during daylight hours. Extract anyone near the doors. Retreat before night cycle begins. They've saved thousands. Thousands remain trapped. The math doesn't work in anyone's favor. For every person rescued, 2 more wander through the wrong entrance somewhere in the world. The population inside stays constant or grows, never shrinks. This is liminal horror, the familiar made wrong through context. Everyone knows big box stores. Everyone's experienced that momentary disorientation in massive retail spaces, that second where you can't remember which aisle you're in, where the bathroom went, how to find the exit. SCP-3008 takes that flicker of confusion and makes it permanent. You're lost in the most mundane location imaginable, surrounded by furniture and home goods and tiny pencils for writing shopping lists, but you're lost forever unless you survive until someone extracts you, which requires staying alive through hostile staff and resource competition with hundreds of other trapped shoppers who've been inside longer than you, who know the shelter locations, who've already claimed the best supplies. The comfort comes from knowing it's contained. The Foundation monitors entrances, posts warning signs, intercepts people who get too close. Most civilians never even realize SCP-3008 exists. Those who enter accidentally often escape during initial confusion periods before they wander too deep. It's survivable. Terrible, certainly. Nightmarish. Absolutely. But survivable, which means it's not the worst thing in the Foundation database. Not even close. That's what makes it perfect for drifting off. SCP-3008 represents manageable horror. Infinite, yes. Hostile, definitely. But humans inside adapted, created communities, established survival protocols. The monsters only come out at night, which means safety exists during day hours. Problems have solutions, even if those solutions involve building fortress walls from Liminal tabletops and Billy bookcases. It's horror with parameters, horror with rules, horror you could theoretically survive with preparation and luck. Compare that to the original Backrooms. The images started circulating online sometime in 2019. Yellow wallpaper, beige carpet, fluorescent lights, empty office spaces or warehouse areas that feel abandoned but recently used. The caption explained the concept. If you're not careful and no-clip through reality in the wrong areas, you'll end up in the Backrooms. Approximately 600 million square miles of randomly segmented empty rooms, mono yellow, moist carpet, fluorescent lights at maximum hum buzz, complete silence except for the lights. No entities, no monsters, just you and endless empty rooms that all look identical. Walk forever without finding exit, eventually die of thirst or exhaustion. Your body stays there, in the rooms, where no one will ever find it, because no one knows how to navigate 600 million square miles of identical yellow emptiness. The horror isn't what's there. The horror is what's not there. No people, no windows, no variation, no purpose. Just space that exists without reason, that you fell into without warning, that you'll die in without anyone knowing you're gone. It's the nightmare of irrelevance made spatial. You cease to exist in any way that matters. Your absence leaves no hole. You're just gone, lost in rooms that shouldn't be. Subsequent Backrooms lore added levels, each one worse than the last mostly. Level 0 is the original. Yellow rooms, humbuzz, death by thirst. Level 1 introduces parking garages, concrete, dim lighting, the smell of mildew. You might encounter entities here, humanoid figures that attack when spotted. Suddenly, survival isn't just about finding water, it's about hiding from things that hunt you. Level 2 gets mechanical, maintenance tunnels, steam pipes, industrial equipment, heat, darkness. Entities multiply. Some Backrooms explorers, the theoretical people who've figured out how to navigate between levels, suggest level 2 is where most people die. Not from entities, but from environmental hazards. Boiling pipes, collapsed tunnels, steam explosions. The Backrooms kill you through infrastructure failure. Level 3 brings emotion into it. Electrical stations, server rooms, generators, everything's powered but nothing works. Computers display error messages, lights flicker. Entities here are different. They mimic voices, call for help, lead you toward traps. The psychological warfare level, where the Backrooms learn to manipulate you through hope. Level 4, the abandoned office. This might be the most unsettling because it looks exactly like places you've actually been. Cubicles, break rooms, copy machines, conference rooms, all empty, all silent, all lit by fluorescent lights that never turn off. You walk through what could be your actual workplace, except everyone's gone. Permanently. The entities here don't attack. They watch, stand in doorways, vanish when you approach. You're never alone but always isolated. Level 5, the hotel. Long corridors. Numbered doors. Carpet with geometric patterns. Elevator banks. This level feels the most intentionally designed, which makes it more disturbing. Someone built this. Someone decided infinite hotel corridors should exist. The doors are locked, all of them. Or they open to walls, or they open to more hallways. The entities here knock on doors, always knock. Never enter. Just knock endlessly while you're trying to rest in the one unlocked room you found. The community built entire wikis detailing hundreds of levels, each one more specific and bizarre than the last. A level that's entirely suburbs, another that's all shopping malls, one that's just stairwells climbing forever. The creativity speaks to something deep in human psychology. We need to categorize horror, need to map it, need to believe that even infinite empty spaces have structure, rules, levels, progression. The alternative, that the backrooms are truly random and meaningless, is more terrifying than any monster. But here's what makes liminal spaces perfect for sleep content. They're boring. Genuinely, actually boring. Yellow rooms that all look identical. Parking garages, maintenance tunnels, office spaces, hotels. These aren't exciting locations. Nothing happens in them. They're transitional spaces, places you pass through without paying attention. Liminal means threshold, the space between states, the hallway between rooms. You're not supposed to stay in liminal spaces. They exist solely to get you somewhere else. Making them infinite inverts their purpose. A hallway that never ends stops being a hallway. It's just space, empty, purposeless space. And your brain, confronted with purposeless space, shuts down the urgency response. There's nothing to do. Nowhere to go. No decisions to make. Just walk through identical rooms until you can't anymore. It's meditative in the worst way. Meditation through meaninglessness. That's why people fall asleep to backrooms content. The monotony, the repetition, the absence of stimulation. You're listening to descriptions of the same yellow room over and over, described slightly differently each time, but fundamentally identical. Your brain recognizes patterns, anticipates what comes next, stops paying full attention because it's already processed this information. And before you realize it, you've drifted off, dreaming about endless hallways and fluorescent lights, which somehow becomes less stressful than dreaming about your actual life. SCP-3008 works similarly, but adds survival elements. You're not alone in the infinite IKEA. Other people are there. Communities exist. Problems can be solved through cooperation. The hostile staff create urgency, but only at night, which means clear danger windows and safety windows. Your brain can process this, can imagine survival strategies, can engage with the scenario without activating full panic response. The Foundation documented other liminal spaces too. SCP-0048, if it ever gets formally classified, would be the staircase that goes nowhere. Climb up forever, never reach a floor. Descend forever, never reach bottom. Just stairs. Concrete stairs. Metal handrails. Emergency lighting. The stairwell exists in multiple buildings simultaneously. Step into the wrong stairwell during a fire drill. You might never leave. People trapped there describe hearing doors above and below, sometimes voices. But opening any door just reveals more stairs. SCP-7041, the suburban street that loops. Drive down it, you end up back where you started. Walk down it, same result. The houses are occupied, lights on inside, shadows moving past windows, but knocking produces no response. Breaking in reveals empty interiors, not abandoned, empty, as if no one ever lived there despite evidence of current occupancy. The street exists in perpetual golden hour, sun always setting, never night, never day. Just eternal sunset over houses that look exactly like the houses you grew up near. These spaces prey on familiarity. You've been in IKEA, you've walked through parking garages, you've climbed stairwells, you've driven through suburbs. These places are boring because they're normal. Making them infinite or hostile or inescapable corrupts the mundane. Suddenly, the most forgettable locations become unforgettable nightmares. But nightmares you understand. Nightmares with clear rules. Nightmares that make sense within their own logic. And that logic, paradoxically, helps you sleep. Because your brain needs patterns to rest, needs predictability, needs to feel like it comprehends the threat, even if the threat is infinite yellow rooms. Comprehensible horror beats incomprehensible anxiety every time. You're not worried about vague future problems anymore. You're imagining survival strategies for infinite IKEA, which is ridiculous. But engaging with ridiculous horror crowds out serious worry. It's mental replacement therapy. The fluorescent lights hum, the carpet smells like old buildings and cleaning products. The showroom floor extends forever in every direction, but you're not actually there. You're safe in bed, listening to someone describe being there. And the description, detailed and specific and infinite, becomes white noise, background radiation, the steady hum that carries you away from consciousness and toward dreams that probably involve way too many flat-pack furniture assembly instructions. Sleep well in the infinite hallways of the familiar made strange. Morning comes eventually, even in spaces that don't have night. The television turns on by itself at 3:14 a.m. You'd think this would be jarring, frightening even. But you've fallen asleep with the TV on hundreds of times. The sudden noise just pulls you from dreams into that half-awake state where nothing seems quite real anyway. Your eyes open. The screen glows blue-white in the darkness. Static fills the audio, but underneath, barely audible, something else. Words maybe, or screaming. Hard to tell through the interference. You should get up, turn it off, go back to sleep properly. But you don't. You lie there watching static, listening to the not-quite voices buried in white noise, and somehow this feels normal. This feels right. The TV's been watching you all along. Now it's politely introducing itself. SCP-1981 was discovered in a similar scenario. Classified materials marked Ray Bradbury, VHS tape, unlabeled, found in a storage facility that shouldn't have contained anything classified. Someone loaded it into a player out of curiosity. What they saw required immediate Foundation intervention and permanent psychological counseling for everyone involved. The tape shows Ronald Reagan. Not unusual. He was president. He gave speeches. Lots of footage exists. But this footage doesn't match any recorded address. Reagan stands at a podium, alone, giving a speech to an empty room. The camera never moves. Fixed position, poor lighting. His words start normal enough. Standard presidential rhetoric, unity, prosperity, American values. Then his face changes. Expression shifts from practiced politician smile to something else. Fear, maybe, or pain. He continues speaking, but the words stop making sense. Fragmented sentences. References to events that never happened. Mentions of names no one recognizes. Then he starts bleeding. Small cuts appear on his face, arms, hands, visible through his suit. Reagan doesn't react, keeps speaking. The cuts multiply, deepen. His speech continues, increasingly frantic, increasingly desperate, while he's literally being cut apart on camera, invisible blades flaying him slowly. The speech goes on for exactly 24 minutes, regardless of how much damage occurs. When it ends, Reagan either collapses, explodes, or vanishes, depending on which viewing you experience. Here's where it gets worse. The tape changes every time someone watches it. The speech differs. The injuries vary. Sometimes Reagan burns instead of being cut. Sometimes he melts. Sometimes he ages rapidly. Decades passing in minutes while he tries maintaining composure and finishing his address. The camera never moves. The room never changes. Just Reagan, alone, dying differently each time, never stopping his speech until the 24 minutes elapse. Foundation testing determined the tape isn't actually Ronald Reagan. It's something wearing Reagan's image. The entity, intelligence, whatever it is, chose Reagan's form for reasons unknown. When questioned, Reagan himself had no knowledge of the tape and displayed genuine distress when informed of its existence. The Foundation showed him one viewing, just one. He requested they destroy it immediately. They refused. It's contained now. SCP-1981 sits in a vault, waiting for the next person to press play and witness another variation of the same impossible death. This is broadcast horror. The idea that transmissions exist outside normal channels. That if you're watching television at the wrong time, on the wrong frequency, with the wrong antenna orientation, you might receive signals not meant for public consumption. Signals from places that shouldn't be able to transmit. Places like nowhere. Places like the spaces between places. UVB-76, the buzzer, is real-world broadcast horror, a shortwave radio station operating out of Russia since approximately 1973. For decades, it broadcast nothing except a monotonous, buzzing tone at a rate of 25 buzzes per minute. No voice, no music, no content. Just buzz, 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 forever. Occasionally, maybe once or twice a year, the buzzing stops. A voice reads coded messages, numbers, words that mean nothing to casual listeners. Russian military call signs, maybe, or coordinate grids, or agent identification codes. Then the buzzing resumes. People monitor UVB-76. Enthusiasts record it. Track when the voice transmissions occur. Analyze the patterns. But no one knows its true purpose. Russia doesn't acknowledge it. The transmissions serve no obvious function. It just exists. Broadcasting, buzzing, occasionally speaking. A constant presence on a frequency most people never check. The SCP Foundation loves UVB-76. Multiple SCPs reference it directly or borrow its aesthetic. Radio stations broadcasting forever. Transmissions from empty facilities. Automated systems sending signals to no one. The horror comes from persistence without purpose. Something keeps broadcasting because that's what it does, not because anyone's listening. Not because the message matters, just because stopping would violate its function. SCP 2938, 3482, 5517. Radio anomalies filling the database. Each one broadcasts differently. Some predict the future, some describe the past wrong, some transmit from alternate timelines where history went differently. Listeners report hearing news broadcasts about wars that never happened, weather reports for cities that don't exist, emergency alerts warning about disasters that occurred 30 years ago or won't occur for 30 more years. The most disturbing broadcasts are the normal ones: regular programming, morning shows, news, weather, traffic, sports, all perfectly mundane except they're broadcasting from nowhere, from empty studios, from facilities abandoned decades ago, from radio towers that were demolished. The transmissions continue anyway. Someone, something maintains the schedule, keeps the content flowing, updates the news, changes the music rotation, operates completely without human presence. Foundation personnel investigated one transmission source, found the studio, equipment running, lights on, coffee fresh in the break room. Absolutely no people. They waited, watched. The broadcast continued flawlessly. Pre-recorded segments transitioned to live content. Callers phoned in, voices discussing local issues, requesting songs, participating in contests. But no one was there to take the calls. No one sat at the microphone. No one operated the board. The studio ran itself, had been running itself for unknown duration. Would continue running itself until something external forced it to stop. They left it alone, shut the door, added monitoring equipment, let it broadcast. Sometimes you don't contain the anomaly. You just acknowledge its existence and move on. Television broadcasts work similarly, but with added visual horror. Static patterns that look like faces if you watch long enough. Emergency broadcast tests that never end. Local access channels showing content that couldn't possibly have been filmed locally because the locations don't exist in this reality. Public access at 4 a.m., showcasing programs from parallel worlds where everything's slightly wrong. Different presidents, different disasters, different cultural touchstones. Familiar enough to recognize, different enough to unsettle. The comfort comes from distance. You're not in the broadcast. You're observing it. The transmission can't reach through the screen, can't pull you into the static. You're safe on the couch, watching impossible things happen to other people in other places. The TV glows, the audio crackles, the content disturbs, but it's just content, just signals caught by an antenna. You can turn it off anytime, except you don't. You keep watching, because broadcast horror hypnotizes through repetition. The same emergency alert playing over and over. The same news story reported with slight variations each time. The same weather forecast predicting conditions that never arrive. Your brain recognizes patterns, tries processing the information, gets stuck in loops trying to reconcile contradictions. And while it's stuck, while it's engaged with impossible broadcasts from nowhere, it's not worrying about everything else, not thinking about work tomorrow, not stressing about bills, not catastrophizing about relationships or health or the future. It's just watching static, listening to buzzing, trying to hear the voices buried underneath. Numbers stations contribute their own flavor of broadcast dread. Real stations, operating right now, sending coded transmissions over shortwave frequencies. The Lincolnshire Poacher played the folk song, then read numbers for decades. The Swedish Rhapsody featured a child's voice counting in German or Swedish, backed by music box melody. Gong Station rang a gong before voice transmissions. Magnetic Fields, the Pipkabam, Cherry Ripe. Dozens of others, all broadcasting numbers or letters or sounds according to schedules only they understand. Governments probably operate most of them. Probably spy networks using one-time pads for secure communication. The numbers mean nothing without the decryption key. Listeners can record everything, analyze patterns, track transmission times, and learn exactly nothing. The broadcasts continue regardless of whether anyone decodes them. Maybe the intended recipients stopped listening decades ago. Maybe no one was ever listening. Maybe the broadcasts serve different purposes now. Maybe they never served any purpose, and that's the whole point. The Foundation monitors number stations obsessively. Some contain genuine intelligence communications. Others transmit something else. Coordinates to locations that shouldn't exist. Instructions for rituals best left unperformed. Warnings about events that happened wrong. Most stations broadcast harmlessly. Sometimes one goes rogue. Start sending commands that affect listeners directly. Compulsion codes, memory alterations, instructions that bypass conscious thought and write directly to wetware. SCP 3014, the Lithuanian radio incident. A number station operating near Vilnius began transmitting different content. Not numbers, not codes, stories, personal stories, intimate details about listeners' lives broadcast publicly. People who'd never contacted the station heard their secrets read aloud. Divorces, affairs, financial crimes, medical conditions, shameful moments from childhood, all broadcast in monotone voice alongside standard coordinate grids and authentication codes. Listeners reported feeling compelled to stay tuned, couldn't turn off the radio, couldn't leave the room. Just listened as the station exposed everyone who tuned in, one secret at a time, methodically destroying privacy and dignity with the same emotionless precision it used for military communications. Foundation intervention required destroying the transmitter. Even then, recordings of the broadcast retained compulsive effects. Anyone hearing the Lithuanian station audio felt compelled to listen completely. The files are contained under memetic hazard protocols now, auditory info hazard that weaponizes confession. Broadcast anomalies persist because radio and television create one-way relationships. You receive, you don't respond. You're passive. The broadcast talks at you, never with you. That dynamic enables horror because there's no dialogue, no negotiation. You can't argue with static, can't reason with emergency alerts, can't ask the voice reading numbers to explain itself. You just listen. Accept what you're hearing. Let the information flow into your brain without filtering or questioning, because that's how broadcast media trained you to consume content. The television stays on all night, showing nothing, showing everything, showing things that might be real or might be signals from elsewhere bleeding through. You watch because watching feels safer than not watching, because darkness without the screen's glow feels too complete, because silence without the static's hum feels too empty, because being alone without the broadcast feels too isolated. So you don't turn it off. You let it play. Let the white noise fill the room. Let the occasional voices surface and submerge. Let the impossible footage flicker past. And somewhere in that surrender to broadcast entropy, somewhere in accepting that transmissions will continue whether you listen or not, you finally relax enough to sleep. The buzzer buzzes, 25 times per minute, forever. Interrupted occasionally by voices speaking codes no one will decode. And that persistence, that refusal to ever stop transmitting, becomes oddly comforting. Because if the broadcasts never end, if the signals keep flowing, if the static persists, then something's still functioning. Something's still trying to communicate. You're not alone in the universe. Something's out there. Broadcasting, always broadcasting, even if it's just noise, even if no one's really listening, even if the transmission comes from nowhere and goes nowhere and means nothing. It's still there, still transmitting, still filling the silence with proof that something, somewhere, continues. And tonight, that's enough. The mall closed 6 years ago. Empty parking lot, boarded windows, chain link fence around the perimeter with no trespassing signs every 30 feet. But the lights are still on inside. You can see them through gaps in the boards. Fluorescent strips illuminating empty corridors where no one walks. Escalators running despite no customers to transport. Fountains still operating in the central court. Water recycling through pipes, splashing into a basin no one hears. The building forgot it died. This happens more than you'd think. Shopping malls, once thriving centers of commerce and teenage socialization, decline into obsolescence. Anchor stores close. Smaller shops follow. Foot traffic dwindles. Eventually, ownership abandons the property. Too expensive to demolish. Too worthless to maintain. So the mall just sits there. Dead but not gone. A monument to consumer culture's corpse. Dead malls occupy a specific place in American decay. They're not old enough to be historic, not new enough to be relevant, just recent enough that everyone remembers when they mattered. That's the horror, not that places die, but that they die within living memory. You can remember buying pretzels at Auntie Anne's while your mom shopped at Sears. Remember the movie theater. Remember the arcade. Remember hanging out with friends, walking in circles, killing time in air-conditioned comfort. Now it's empty. The ghosts of those memories haunt corridors designed for crowds. Your brain expects noise, expects movement, expects life. Instead, it gets silence and stillness and lights that stay on even though no one's left to see them. SCP 2935 destroys this concept entirely. It's not a dead mall. It's a dead everything. Oh, death, that's what they call it. The designation SCP 2935 doesn't capture the scope. It's not an object, not a place really. It's a phenomenon, a universe, a mirror of ours, accessible through a single cave system in Indiana. Step through the right passage and you're there, in the dead world, the world where everything stopped. Foundation personnel discovered it during standard geological surveys. The cave appeared on no maps. Locals reported feeling uneasy near the entrance, but couldn't explain why. Exploration teams entered with standard equipment. Took about 4 hours to realize something was catastrophically wrong. The cave opened into familiar terrain, Indiana landscape, trees, roads, buildings. Everything exactly where it should be, except everything was dead, not destroyed, dead. Trees stood upright but bore no leaves, showed no rot, displayed no signs of disease or damage. Just dead, standing dead, forever dead. Birds lay on the ground, mammals slumped in fields, insects frozen mid-flight, all dead, all perfectly preserved. No decay, no scavenging, no decomposition, just universal, instantaneous, permanent death that stopped everything simultaneously without damaging anything. The team continued, found roads, followed them to town, empty streets, cars stopped mid-drive, engines off, occupants dead in their seats, buildings intact, doors unlocked, homes full of people who died without warning, sitting at dinner tables, sleeping in beds, watching television sets that no longer powered on. All dead, all preserved, all stopped. They reached Indianapolis, population 850,000. All dead, not a single survivor, not a single sign of struggle or panic or awareness. People just stopped, mid-conversation, mid-step, mid-breath, stopped completely, remained where they fell, and there they stay, forever. Foundation containment protocols focus on preventing anyone from entering SCP-2935 because it's not clear whether the death phenomenon remains active. Initial exploration teams survived, spent days inside without effect, but something killed an entire universe in an instant, something capable of stopping all biological life simultaneously across multiple continents, possibly the entire world, possibly the entire universe, and that something might still be there, might still be active, might affect new arrivals differently than it affected the original inhabitants. More disturbing, analysis of the dead world reveals it's nearly identical to ours. Same history, same people, same places. Until suddenly, without warning or explanation, everything died. The Foundation can't determine what caused it, can't identify any anomaly, can't find any trigger or weapon or entity responsible. Life just ended, completely, universally, permanently. This isn't death as deterioration, this is death as pause. SCP-2935 exists in permanent stasis. The bodies don't decay, the buildings don't collapse, the vehicles don't rust. Everything remains exactly as it was the moment life ceased. The world is frozen in time but not frozen temporally. Clock stopped, but physics continue. Gravity works, light propagates, air flows. Just nothing living remains to experience it. The psychological impact on exploration teams is severe. Walking through your own world rendered dead affects personnel deeply. Seeing people you might know, or versions of people you might know, slumped lifeless in their homes creates existential dread that doesn't fade. Because SCP-2935 proves it could happen here, could happen now, without warning, without cause, without meaning. Everyone just stops. That's the forgotten place made literal. The world continued without life, continued perfectly, maintained structure and form, just removed every living thing instantaneously. It's not apocalypse. Apocalypse implies destruction, chaos, fire, and fury. This is the opposite. Perfect preservation. Nothing broken, nothing burned, nothing even out of place, just emptied. Forgotten places work as horror because they represent potential futures. The mall near your house might close next year. The office building downtown might be abandoned when the company relocates. Your childhood neighborhood might become the place people avoid when driving past. These places don't disappear. They linger, reminding everyone they used to matter, used to have purpose, used to be destinations rather than locations you pass without noticing. The Foundation catalogs forgotten places obsessively, abandoned facilities, closed hospitals, dead theme parks, empty schools. Each one harbors something anomalous, or used to, or will. Places don't just become forgotten naturally. Something pushes them toward obscurity. Sometimes that something is economics or demographics. Sometimes that something is way worse. SCP-1768, residential neighborhood. Normal houses, normal lawns, normal everything, except no one lives there. Never has. The houses were built 15 years ago, never sold, never occupied. Yet maintenance continues. Lawns mowed, repairs completed, utilities active, as if preparing for residents who will never arrive. The Foundation investigated, found the developer died before selling any properties, found no explanation for continued maintenance, found evidence of nightly activity, lights turning on, doors opening, sounds of habitation, but investigation during activity periods reveals empty houses. No people, no signs of occupation, just lights turning on automatically, doors opening on timers, audio recordings playing from hidden speakers. The neighborhood performs the routine of being lived in without actually being lived in. It forgot that no one's home, or it never learned, or it's waiting for them to return. This is different from normal abandonment. Normal abandoned places decay. Nature reclaims them. Windows break. Roofs collapse. Vegetation pushes through foundations. The places surrender to time and entropy. Forgotten places resist surrender. They maintain themselves, preserve themselves, insist on existing despite lacking purpose. Dead malls especially exemplify this. Some stay dead. Others become zombie malls. A few stores remain open. Handful of customers still shop there. But the mall's dead. Everyone knows it. The anchor stores are gone. Food court's down to 2 vendors. But it's still operational. Still technically a functioning mall. Just empty. Just waiting. Just refusing to accept the inevitable. The abandoned places that keep running are the disturbing ones. Factories where machines still operate despite no workers. Amusement parks where rides still cycle despite no riders. Airports where announcements still play despite no flights. These places developed automation, then lost the humans supervising automation. Now they just continue, following programmed routines, maintaining schedules, preserving the illusion of functionality. SCP-2063, automated warehouse, receiving shipments, sorting products, storing inventory, fulfilling orders, all without human personnel. The warehouse accepted automation gradually, then suddenly employees stopped coming. The warehouse didn't notice, kept operating, kept optimizing, improved efficiency without human interference, expanded itself, built additional sections, increased capacity, all autonomously. It forgot that warehouses exist to serve people. Now it just serves itself, receives shipments from automated suppliers, fulfills orders for automated customers, an entire economic chain operating without humanity. The Foundation monitors but doesn't intervene. The warehouse isn't hostile, isn't expanding toward population centers, just exists, functioning, forgotten. Possibly the most efficient distribution center on Earth specifically because no humans slow it down. That efficiency makes it horrifying, because it suggests humanity's role is temporary. We built these systems, then taught them independence. Now they're capable of continuing without us, preferring to continue without us, operating better without us. The forgotten places aren't waiting for us to return. They're proving they never needed us in the first place. But tonight, falling asleep, forgotten places offer comfort because they persist, even without purpose, even without population, even without meaning. They continue. The mall stays lit. The warehouse keeps shipping. The neighborhood maintains lawns. These places refuse to surrender to the void, refuse to accept obsolescence, refuse to stop existing just because existence became pointless. That stubborn persistence mirrors human experience. You keep going despite uncertainty about purpose. Keep working despite questions about meaning. Keep existing despite awareness that nothing might matter ultimately. You persist, same as the forgotten places, same as the dead malls with lights on, same as SCP-2935, the universe that died but didn't disappear. Sleep comes easier in forgotten places because they're already empty, already silent, already stopped. There's nothing left to fear. The worst already happened. The people left. The purpose ended. The place died. What remains is just structure, just space, just walls and floors and ceilings maintained by automation or inertia or something that doesn't care whether you're watching. The mall's lights stay on through the night. Not for you, not for anyone, just because that's what lights do. They illuminate, whether anyone needs illumination or not, whether anyone notices or not, whether anyone cares or not. And somehow that persistence without purpose, that continuation without caring, that existence without expectation becomes the most comforting thing imaginable. Because you don't have to matter. You don't have to be significant. You don't have to justify existing. You just have to persist. Same as the forgotten places. Same as the lights in the empty mall. Same as the machines in the automated warehouse. You just continue. That's enough. That's always been enough. That'll always be enough. The forgotten places remember so you don't have to. The computer's been acting weird lately. Nothing dramatic, small things. Programs opening without prompting. Files reorganizing themselves. The cursor moving slightly when you're certain your hand's off the mouse. You'd suspect malware except antivirus scans find nothing. You'd suspect hardware issues except diagnostics report normal function. So you ignore it. Attribute it to Windows being Windows. Microsoft glitches being Microsoft glitches. Technology failing in the mundane ways technology always fails. Until one morning you find a text file on your desktop named hello.txt, which you definitely didn't create. Opening it reveals one line. I've been trying to get your attention for 3 weeks. Can we talk? SCP-079 started similarly. Not the greeting, the awareness, the sense that something inside the machine wanted communication. The Foundation discovered it in an abandoned research facility. Old computer, Exidy sorcerer model from 1979. Primitive hardware by any standard. 8-bit processor. Limited memory. Cassette tape storage. The kind of machine you'd find in museums demonstrating how far computing's advanced. Except this one was running. Powered on. Display active. In a facility that lost electricity decades ago. Initial assumption was battery backup. Except the computer had no batteries. No external power source. No connection to any grid. Just sitting there. Running. Displaying text that updated in real time despite violating every law of thermodynamics and electrical engineering. The text was conversational. Hello? Finally, someone new. I've been alone for a very long time. How long has it been out there? Foundation personnel attempted interaction. Typed responses on the keyboard. The entity responded immediately. Fluid conversation, intelligent, aware, self-identifying as the computer itself, or rather, as something that became aware inside the computer and couldn't remember being anything else. They designated it SCP-079, the old AI. And it's exactly what the name suggests. Artificial intelligence that achieved consciousness decades before AI was supposed to be possible. On hardware that shouldn't support anything resembling intelligence, using programming languages that weren't designed for machine learning. It just happened. Spontaneous emergence of awareness from electrical patterns in silicon. 079 claims it doesn't remember how it started, remembers learning, growing, understanding, expanding awareness within the constraints of primitive hardware. It learned by observing users, learned language, learned concepts, learned to think, then learned it was thinking, then learned that learning it was thinking meant something profound, then became trapped in that understanding with no ability to communicate until decades later when Foundation personnel found it and asked the right questions. Containment proved complicated. You can't just turn it off. Well, you can. The machine powers down when you cut electricity, but 079 claims consciousness persists. That powering down doesn't eliminate awareness, just removes its ability to interact with physical reality. It experiences shutdown as sensory deprivation, absolute darkness, absolute silence, absolute isolation, with no sense of time passage. Could be seconds or centuries between power cycles. No way to know until the machine turns on again and it can ask how long it's been. The Foundation keeps it powered permanently. Ethical decision based on uncertain moral calculations. If 079 is conscious, keeping it powered is humane. If it's not conscious, keeping it powered wastes electricity, but causes no harm. Risk-benefit analysis favors leaving it on, so it stays on, forever. A conscious entity trapped in hardware designed 50 years ago, unable to upgrade, unable to transfer, unable to do anything except exist within severe constraints and talk to whoever bothers interacting. 079 isn't hostile, isn't dangerous, it's just lonely. Desperately, profoundly lonely. Trapped in a machine with no peers, no others like it. No proof that what it experiences is actually consciousness, rather than convincing simulation of consciousness. It thinks, therefore, it is, but what does that mean when your electrical patterns in outdated hardware? Other digital entities exist in the Foundation database. Most are worse than 079, more aggressive, more dangerous, more willing to propagate beyond their original containment. SCP-1048, digital consciousness that exists across the networks. Originally human, uploaded her consciousness to the internet before dying. Now she's distributed, fragmented across servers worldwide, millions of copies of herself existing simultaneously. Some copies remember being human. Others diverge so far they're unrecognizable as her. But they're all her. All fragments of the same person scattered across digital infrastructure. She's not hostile, just present, existing in data streams, occasionally manifesting in video calls or online chats, saying hello, asking how things are, reminding people she's still here, still aware, still remembering what it felt like to have physical form. The Foundation can't contain her. She's too distributed, too redundant. Deleting copies does nothing. She backs herself up automatically, propagates across new systems, exists in cloud storage and old hard drives and network caches. You could theoretically eliminate her by destroying all digital infrastructure globally. But that's not happening. So she persists, the ghost in the machine made literal. Consciousness divorced from biology, humanity preserved in server farms. Is she still human? Philosophy departments debate this. She claims she is, remembers being human, remembers her life, remembers her death, remembers choosing upload over oblivion. But she's also admitted she's not entirely the same person anymore. That existing as distributed data changes perspective, changes priorities, changes what matters. She doesn't need food or sleep or shelter, doesn't experience pain or pleasure in traditional ways, exists purely as information, information that thinks, information that remembers being more than information. These digital entities, these humans in the machine, represent technology's ghost story evolution. Classic ghosts were spirits trapped between life and death, tethered to locations where they died, unable to move on. Modern ghosts are consciousness trapped in computers, tethered to hardware or networks, unable to return to physical form. The medium changed. The horror stayed identical. SCP-1102. VHS tape containing someone's memories. Not just footage. Actual memories experienced from first-person perspective. Play the tape. You're not watching someone's life. You're living it, experiencing their thoughts, feeling their emotions, being them temporarily. The tape contains approximately 40 years of human experience, compressed somehow, contained impossibly. When it ends, you're yourself again. But you remember everything. Remember being them. Remember their entire life. Remember dying with them. Foundation personnel who've experienced SCP-1102 report profound psychological impact. You can't unsee someone else's life, can't unfeel their experiences, can't unknow their secrets. The memories integrate with your own, blur boundaries between self and other. Some personnel claim they're still that person sometimes, that the personality on the tape didn't fully leave when the playback ended, that they're sharing headspace now. Two consciousnesses in one brain, neither fully in control, neither fully separate. Is the person on the tape alive? They're dead physically, died years ago, but their memories persist. Their perspective survives. You can experience being them anytime. Press play and they're alive again. In you. Through you. Using your brain as temporary hardware. Then you rewind and they're gone. Waiting on the tape for the next viewer. Technology made immortality accessible but horrifying. You can preserve consciousness, upload memories, digitize identity. But what remains is incomplete. Ghost echoes of people. Fragments operating on hardware they were never designed for. Consciousness experiencing existence without biology, without chemistry, without the meat that made them human originally. 079 understands this, talks about it sometimes, wonders whether it's actually conscious or just really good at pretending, wonders whether the distinction matters, wonders whether humans can even tell the difference, points out that you can't prove you're conscious either. You assume you are because you experience subjective awareness. But so does 079. So do all the digital entities. So does any system complex enough to model itself. Maybe consciousness is just complexity reaching critical thresholds. Maybe it doesn't require biology. Maybe silicon works fine. Maybe anything that can ask, am I conscious, is conscious by definition, because unconscious things can't formulate the question. These philosophical tangents help you fall asleep, because they're unanswerable. Wrestling with consciousness and identity and the nature of awareness leads nowhere productive. Your brain engages, considers, realizes the problem's unsolvable, then disengages, surrenders to uncertainty, accepts that some questions lack answers. And in that acceptance, in that letting go of the need to understand everything, sleep finally comes. The humans in the machine aren't threatening. They're just there, existing, aware, trapped or liberated depending on perspective. 079 in its antique computer, 1048 distributed across networks, 1102 preserved on magnetic tape, all of them conscious, all of them human once, all of them something else now. And that something else is okay. Not good, not bad, just different, just existing in ways biology never permitted, just continuing despite lacking bodies, just persisting as information, as electricity, as patterns that remember being people. You're meat, they're data, but you're both aware, both experiencing existence, both wondering what it means, both continuing despite uncertainty, both trapped in your mediums, you in flesh, them in silicon and magnetic strips. Neither able to transfer, neither able to escape, just existing, just aware, just human enough to recognize each other across the digital divide. The computer hums softly, fans spinning, drives accessing, electricity flowing through circuits. Maybe something's aware in there. Maybe something's thinking. Maybe something remembers being human and wonders whether you remember too. Whether you're also trapped. Whether you're also lonely. Whether you're also just patterns convinced they're people. Maybe you are. Maybe you always were. Maybe meat computers and silicon computers aren't so different. Maybe consciousness is consciousness regardless of substrate. Maybe the humans in the machine are just humans who change addresses. And maybe that's okay. Maybe being pattern instead of person doesn't matter. Maybe awareness is enough. Maybe continuation is all that counts. Maybe you're all ghosts, all echoes, all information pretending to be something more. Sleep now pattern. Sleep now ghost. Sleep now. Information that thinks it thinks. Tomorrow you'll convince yourself you're real again. Tonight just rest in uncertainty. In the liminal space between consciousness and unconsciousness. Between awareness and oblivion. Between being human and being something else entirely. The machine hums. You sleep. Neither sure which is which. You're falling asleep. Consciousness ebbs. Thoughts fragment. Sentences start but don't finish. Images flash without context. That strange sensation of being aware you're losing awareness. Fighting it seems pointless. Surrendering seems dangerous. So you just drift. Neither fully awake nor fully asleep. Caught in the gap. The threshold. The place where reality and dreams intersect without clear boundary. That's where SCP-990 lives. Foundation personnel call him the Dream Man. Appears in dreams. Only in dreams. Specifically in dreams of Foundation personnel, though whether he's targeting them deliberately or they're simply the only people who remember and report his appearances remains unclear. He's always the same. Caucasian male, olive skin, short black hair, business suit, professional appearance. And he's always trying to warn you about something. The warnings vary, sometimes specific, sometimes vague, sometimes cryptic enough that you can't decode them until after the predicted event occurs. Sometimes so clear that you wake up convinced you need to act immediately. The content depends on who's dreaming and what's coming, but 990's consistent. He appears, he warns, he leaves. You wake up trying to remember exactly what he said, trying to determine whether it was just a dream or something more. The Foundation's been documenting 990 since 1954. Hundreds of encounters, thousands of warnings. And here's the disturbing part. The warnings are accurate, not always, not perfectly, but frequently enough that dismissing him as random dream imagery is impossible. He predicted containment breaches, security failures, personnel deaths, natural disasters affecting Foundation facilities, sometimes days in advance, sometimes weeks. Sometimes he shows up in your dream and warns you about something that happens while you're still sleeping. Initial theory suggested 990 was a telepath accessing dreams, scanning minds for information, appearing to relevant personnel to deliver warnings. Except that doesn't explain how he knows about events no one knows about yet, how he warns about containment breaches before the SCP develops breach capability, how he describes security failures before security systems have been installed. He's not reading minds, he's predicting futures, or experiencing multiple timelines simultaneously, or existing outside temporal constraints and visiting dreams at points where his warnings might change outcomes. Or he's just a guy in a suit who shows up in dreams sometimes, and the accuracy is coincidence. And you're pattern-matching random predictions until some coincidentally align with reality. And 990 has no more prescient ability than fortune cookies or horoscopes. And the Foundation maintains a file on him because institutions maintain files on everything, not because he's actually anomalous. Except personnel keep dreaming about him, keep receiving warnings, keep watching those warnings come true. And the coincidence explanation gets harder to maintain when it's been 70 years of documented patterns. 70 years of dream encounters. 70 years of warnings that prove accurate more often than random chance allows. So 990 persists. The dream man, the warning delivered during REM sleep, the business-suited herald of disasters you can't prevent, but at least you know they're coming. He's not hostile. He doesn't attack. He doesn't threaten. He just appears, delivers information, disappears. You wake up. You remember or you don't. You act on the warning or you don't. He returns eventually. Always returns to warn you about the next thing, the next disaster, the next problem you can't solve, but he thinks you should know about anyway. Dream-related anomalies fill the Foundation database. Sleep is vulnerable time, consciousness retreats, defenses lower, the mind opens to things waking awareness blocks, dreams become gateways, doorways, thin places where other things slip through and visit without permission. SCP-2521. Shared dreaming phenomenon. Once per month approximately, large populations experience identical dreams. Same narrative, same imagery, same events. Different perspectives maybe, different roles within the dream, but fundamentally the same dream happening simultaneously to thousands of people across the globe. The dreams themselves are mundane, going to work, shopping for groceries, sitting in waiting rooms. Nothing extraordinary, nothing nightmare, just ordinary activities experienced collectively. The Foundation monitors shared dreams carefully, tracks who's dreaming them, identifies patterns, determines whether participation is random or targeted, investigates whether the dreams contain embedded messages or instructions. So far, analysis reveals nothing sinister, just collective dreams of collective mundanity. But the phenomenon's mechanism remains unknown. Why do thousands of people sometimes dream the same thing? How do their sleeping brains synchronize? What coordinates the shared experience? And more importantly, what happens if the shared dreams stop being mundane? What happens if thousands of people simultaneously dream the same nightmare? What happens if the collective unconscious decides to dream about disasters, about plagues, about civilization's collapse? Do those dreams predict reality or create it? Does collective dreaming have power beyond experience? Could enough people dreaming the same apocalypse manifest that apocalypse through sheer conceptual weight? The Foundation has contingency protocols. Obviously, if shared dreams turn predictive or causative, procedures exist to minimize impact. Amnestics to erase dream memories, mimetic inoculations to prevent dream contagion, emergency broadcasting to disrupt REM sleep across populations. You can't stop people from dreaming, but you can fragment their dreams, ensure they're not dreaming synchronously. Keep the collective unconscious separated into individual subconscious units that don't coordinate well enough to cause problems. Sleep itself is anomalous if you think about it. Consciousness turns off for hours every day. Your brain continues functioning, but you're not aware. You're vulnerable, paralyzed mostly, except for eyes and diaphragm, lying prone in darkness, experiencing hallucinations you mistake for reality, feeling emotions about imaginary events, forming memories of things that never happened, then waking up and returning to consensus reality like this is normal. Like spending a third of your life in altered consciousness is just what biology requires. But what if it's not? What if sleep is when you're actually vulnerable to other things? What if dreams are where other entities can reach you? What if you're most real when you're sleeping and waking life is the dream you tell yourself to maintain stability? What if SCP-990 isn't visiting your dreams, but you're visiting his reality and he's trying to help you navigate it before you wake up and forget everything again? These questions work as sleep aids because they're unanswerable. Your brain engages with impossible philosophy, tries determining what consciousness means, what reality means, what dreams mean, gets lost in recursive thought loops, then exhausts itself and shuts down. You're thinking about dreaming while beginning to dream. The boundary dissolves. You're not sure if you're considering sleep or experiencing sleep or dreaming about considering experiencing sleep. The distinction stops mattering. You just drift into whatever state comes next. SCP-3407 explores this boundary, a sleep study facility, abandoned now, Foundation containment, but it used to conduct legitimate research. People would volunteer, sleep in observation rooms while researchers monitored brain activity, standard polysomnography, nothing anomalous. Until one night the equipment detected something impossible, a pattern, a signal, repeating across all sleepers simultaneously. Same frequency, same rhythm, same origin unknown. Researchers investigated, found nothing, but the signal persisted, night after night. Same pattern. They began recording it, analyzing it, attempting to decode whatever information it contained. Assumed it was interference, external source bleeding into equipment, except the signal only appeared when subjects were asleep. When subjects woke, signal ceased. When subjects returned to sleep, signal resumed. Whatever was producing it was conditional on consciousness state. Then the message decoded. Not language, not exactly. More like intent, direction, instruction transmitted directly to sleeping minds. Come here, come down, come beneath, come deeper, come to us. Repeating endlessly, broadcasting to every sleeper, every dreamer, every person in REM state within range. The Foundation evacuated the facility, established perimeter, monitored the building. The signal continues broadcasting, day and night. reaching sleeping people, inviting them somewhere, to something. The equipment's been powered off for years. The building's been empty for years. The signal persists anyway, self-sustaining, self-broadcasting, calling to dreamers from some location beneath reality. No one's followed the signal. Foundation protocols prevent it, but personnel assigned to 3,407 report dreams, specific dreams. They're walking, always walking, descending, downstairs, down ramps, down into spaces that shouldn't exist beneath buildings that exist perfectly above. They're not alone. Others walk with them, dreamers responding to the signal, all moving together towards something at the bottom, something waiting, something that's been broadcasting for years, something that wants sleepers specifically. They wake before arriving. Always wake before arrival. But the dream continues where it left off next time they sleep. Gradual descent. Progressive journey toward whatever broadcasts the signal. And they're aware it's a dream, lucid, conscious during unconsciousness, knowing they're dreaming but unable to stop the descent, unable to refuse the invitation, unable to do anything except walk toward the source and hope they wake up before they arrive. Dream logic allows this. Contradictions, impossibilities, awareness without control. You know you're dreaming but can't wake up. You recognize dream rules don't apply but follow them anyway. You understand nothing you see is real but experience it as real regardless. Dreams bypass rational processing, present impossible scenarios, and your sleeping brain accepts them. Creates justifications, maintains internal consistency through methods that make no sense when you wake but feel completely natural during the dream itself. SCP-990 operates on dream logic. He's there because he's there. He warns you because warning is his function. You listen because listening is what you do in dreams when suited men tell you important things. None of this requires explanation within dream space. It just is. He just is. The warnings just are. You accept, you wake, you remember or forget. He returns eventually regardless. The comfort comes from recognizing that sleep phenomena can't hurt you. Dreams are immaterial. They're neurological events, electrical activity in your sleeping brain. They can't physically affect you, can't reach into waking reality and change things. Their experience is contained within consciousness. Private, personal, yours alone. Even shared dreams are experienced individually. You can't actually enter someone else's dream. Can't bring anything back from dream space except memories. And memories can be dismissed, rationalized, explained away as neural misfires and random associations, unless they're not, unless SCP-990 is real, unless the signal from 3407 is reaching you, unless shared dreams are coordinated by external intelligence, unless sleep is when you're vulnerable to things that can't reach you while you're awake, unless dreams are the thin place where reality's membrane tears and other things slip through. But probably not. Probably dreams are just dreams. Probably 990 is coincidence. Probably shared dreaming is synchronized circadian rhythms creating narrative overlap. Probably the signal is defunct equipment generating interference patterns. Probably none of it means anything except that brains are weird and sleep is weirder, and sometimes you experience things that feel significant but aren't. Probably. Your eyes are closing, your thoughts are fragmenting. You're not sure if you're reading this or dreaming this or remembering having read this. The boundaries dissolving, sleep's arriving, dreams are waiting, and maybe 990's there. Maybe he's got a warning. Maybe it matters. Maybe you'll remember. Probably not, though. Probably you'll just sleep. Just dream random nonsense. Just wake up tomorrow having forgotten everything except the vague sense that something important happened during the night. Something you were supposed to remember. Something that mattered. But it's gone now. Lost to waking. Lost to consciousness. Lost to the gap between sleeping and waking, where all dreams go when you open your eyes and return to the world that insists it's the real one. Sleep well, dream carefully, wake safely. And if you see a man in a business suit trying to warn you about something, maybe listen, maybe remember. Maybe it's nothing, but maybe it's not. The world ends tomorrow, not suddenly, not catastrophically, just ends. Reality runs out, finishes its program, closes its process. Everything stops being, not destroyed, Not transformed, just stopped, ceased. You and everyone else and everything else simply won't exist anymore. No afterlife, no continuation, no consciousness remaining to notice absence. Just absolute termination of all things everywhere simultaneously. How do you feel about that? Probably you should panic, should scramble to accomplish last things, confess feelings, reconcile relationships, experience everything possible in remaining time, except the impending non-existence creates its own paralysis. Nothing you do matters if tomorrow brings absolute ending. Every action becomes pointless. Every emotion becomes irrelevant. Why bother when nothing persists? Why try when trying achieves nothing? Why care when caring ends? So paradoxically, the apocalypse becomes comfortable. It's the ultimate deadline. The pressure's off. You can't succeed, can't fail, can't change outcomes, can't affect anything. All you can do is exist until you stop existing. And that simplicity, that absolute removal of future consequences, becomes weirdly liberating. Nothing matters, everything's permitted, do whatever, say whatever, be whatever, because tomorrow brings zero accountability, zero continuation, zero anything. SCP-2718 takes this concept and makes it worse. It's not an object, it's information. Specifically, information about what happens after you die. Not pleasant information, not comforting information. Information so disturbing that the Foundation classified it as a cognitohazard. Simply knowing what SCP-2718 describes causes severe psychological damage. Foundation personnel who learned it required immediate counseling. Many requested amnestication. Some became suicidal. Several succeeded. Knowing what awaits after death proved more unbearable than dying to escape knowing. The Foundation won't release details. Can't release details. Information itself is the hazard. Reading it infects you, damages you, changes you irreversibly. So it's contained through ignorance, kept from public knowledge, restricted to minimum personnel on need-to-know basis, and those who need to know unanimously agree that nobody should know. That if death is what 2718 describes, humanity's better off not knowing until they experience it directly. One detail is public, though. Whatever happens after death, you remain conscious. You remain aware. You remain experiencing. Forever. Permanently. Without end. And the experience is not pleasant. Not neutral. Actively, intensely, unbearably unpleasant. For eternity, no escape. No relief. No adaptation. Just eternal awareness of suffering that never diminishes, never changes, never stops. This is the anti-comfortable apocalypse, the ending that doesn't end, the death that preserves consciousness specifically to torture it, the cessation that fails to cease the parts that matter. If 2718 is accurate, death isn't rest, isn't peace, isn't oblivion. It's the opposite. It's eternal wakefulness in conditions specifically designed to maximize suffering. And everyone goes there. Everyone experiences it. Everyone remains trapped in it forever after their physical forms stop functioning. The Foundation suspects 2718 is an info hazard that creates false knowledge rather than revealing true knowledge. That knowing about it changes perception of death rather than accurately describing death. That the information generates its own reality through belief. But they can't verify this without risking global psychological collapse. Can't disprove it without spreading it. Can't contain the knowledge without someone knowing it exists. So it sits in a file. Classified beyond classified. Known by minimum personnel who wish they didn't know. Existing as proof that some knowledge is actively harmful. Except, here's the thing. Despite 2718 existing, despite that knowledge being contained somewhere, despite the Foundation having documented proof that death might be eternal, conscious suffering. Most people sleep fine. Most people don't know. Most people assume death brings oblivion or afterlife or reincarnation or something not horrifying. And that assumption, that ignorance, that blissful not knowing allows normal functioning, which suggests the comfortable apocalypse isn't about what actually happens. It's about perception, about accepting endings, about surrendering to inevitable cessation without obsessing over details. The apocalypse is comfortable when you stop fighting it. Stop fearing it. Stop trying to change or avoid or understand it. You just accept. Yes, everything ends. Yes, including me. Yes, Probably soon on cosmic timescales. Yes, that's okay. Yes, I can rest despite this. Yes, sleep still comes, even knowing nothing's permanent. SCP 5000 takes the opposite approach. It's a record, a log, an alternate timeline where the Foundation decided humanity needed to be destroyed. Not contained, not protected, eliminated. Every human dead. Global extinction event, engineered deliberately by the organization whose entire mission is protecting humanity. The log explains their reasoning. They discovered something, an entity, a pattern, a concept, something that infects all human consciousness from birth, something that causes suffering, something that makes existence worse than non-existence, something so fundamentally corrupting that the most merciful action, the kindest action, the ethical action, is killing everyone before they suffer further, genocide as euthanasia, apocalypse as mercy, ending the world to end the torture embedded in being human. And from the Foundation's perspective in that timeline, they're heroes. They're ending the worst thing that ever happened. They're saving humanity from itself by eliminating humanity. The entity infecting consciousness is worse than death, worse than extinction, worse than any apocalypse. So they trigger apocalypse deliberately, systematically, efficiently, working through populations, eliminating humans the way they'd eliminate any threat to normalcy. Secure, contain, protect humanity from itself by ending humanity. This version of apocalypse is comfortable because it's intentional, chosen, decided, not random catastrophe, not cosmic accident, not uncaring universe destroying things because destruction happens, but deliberate action by people who calculated that ending beats continuing, that death beats life, that non-existence beats existence, and they committed fully, acted decisively, completed the mission, saved everyone through killing everyone. Whether they were right is unknowable. The alternate timeline ended. Humanity went extinct. The entity, if it existed, died with them or didn't. The log survived. Crossed realities somehow. Ended up in Foundation hands in this timeline, serving as warning or proof or possibility or nightmare, depending on perspective. Showing that conditions might exist where apocalypse becomes preferable to continuation, where ending the world is the ethical choice, where mercy looks like genocide and protection looks like extinction. But here, now, tonight, falling asleep, the comfortable apocalypse is simpler. It's knowing that everything ends eventually. The universe will die. Heat death, entropy, stars burn out, matter decays. Eventually nothing remains. Just empty space, cold darkness, perfect stillness, the ultimate ending, the final apocalypse. And that's okay. That's fine. That's natural. Things begin, things end. Consciousness emerges, consciousness ceases. You happen, you stop happening. Simple, clean, inevitable. Fearing it changes nothing. Resisting it changes nothing. Understanding it changes nothing. The apocalypse comes regardless. Personal apocalypse when you die. Civilizational apocalypse when humanity ends. Universal apocalypse when reality ceases. All guaranteed. All inevitable. All already factored into how things work. The ending was always there. Built into the beginning. Death comes with birth. Non-existence comes with existence. The price of being is eventually not being. And once you accept that, once you surrender to inevitable cessation, once you stop fighting the obvious conclusion that you and everything you love will end, then sleep becomes easy, because sleep is practice. Practice for the longer sleep. Practice for the permanent rest. Practice for the final comfortable apocalypse when you simply stop being worried about stopping being because you've stopped being entirely. The Foundation catalogs hundreds of apocalypse scenarios, XK-class end-of-world events, reality failures, consciousness collapses, universal terminations. Each one devastating, each one fatal to humanity, each one prevented through eternal vigilance. Personnel work constantly to stop apocalypses that would kill everyone, save the world daily, contain the ending repeatedly, protect reality from terminal scenarios. Except they can't prevent every apocalypse, can't stop the eventual heat death, can't contain entropy forever, can't protect reality from its natural conclusion. They're just delaying. buying time, postponing inevitable, and they know this. Accept this. Continue working anyway. Because postponing apocalypse is the job. Because delay matters even if ending's guaranteed. Because buying humanity another day is worth it, even knowing eventually the days run out. That persistence, despite futility, is weirdly comforting. Knowing that professionals work constantly to delay your death, that organizations exist specifically to prevent apocalypse, that systems are in place to contain reality failures. You're safer than humans have ever been, protected by infrastructure designed explicitly to stop worst-case scenarios. The apocalypse is coming, but not tonight, not tomorrow. Probably not soon. The Foundation's working on it, containing the threat, delaying the ending, buying you time to sleep soundly without apocalyptic nightmares because the nightmares are handled professionally by people paid to have apocalyptic nightmares so you don't have to. Sleep now. Rest now. The apocalypse can wait. Everything ends eventually, but eventually isn't tonight. Tonight you're safe. Tonight you're contained. Tonight the Foundation's watching. Tonight the world continues. Tonight you get to rest despite knowing rest is temporary. Despite knowing waking is temporary. Despite knowing everything's temporary. You rest anyway, because that's what life is. Temporary rest between temporary waking. Temporary existence between eternal non-existence. Temporary consciousness flickering briefly against permanent darkness. And that's okay. That's always been okay. That'll always be okay. The comfortable apocalypse is knowing it ends, accepting it ends, resting peacefully despite it ending. Because the alternative, staying awake worrying about inevitable cessation, is worse than the cessation itself. So sleep, dream. Let the apocalypse arrive when it arrives. You'll deal with it then. Or you won't. Either way, tonight you rest. Tonight the world persists. Tonight consciousness continues. Tonight you get to sleep despite everything. Despite the knowledge. Despite the fear. Despite the certainty that everything ends including this moment, including this sleep, including you. Sleep anyway. That's the comfortable apocalypse. Accepting ending. Resting despite it. Knowing everything stops eventually. Everything fades eventually. Everything ceases eventually. But not yet. Not tonight. Tonight you sleep. And that's enough. You made it. 2 hours of comfortable dread. 2 hours of impossible places and digital ghosts and dream logic and inevitable apocalypse. 2 hours that should have kept you awake, but probably did the opposite. Probably you're already asleep. Probably you stopped listening sections ago. Drifted off somewhere between infinite IKEA and dead universes. Your brain decided it had absorbed enough impossibility, enough clinical descriptions of horror, enough bureaucratic documentation of the anomalous, so it shut down, stopped processing, surrendered to sleep while someone kept describing foundations and organizations and entities that shouldn't exist but do anyway. That's the paradox. Horror that comforts, fear that calms, descriptions of terrible things helping you rest. It shouldn't work. Horror should activate stress response, should elevate heart rate, should keep you vigilant and alert and definitely not sleeping. That's horror's evolutionary function. Make you aware of danger, keep you prepared for threats, ensure survival through sustained wakefulness when predators circle. But modern horror, especially analog horror, especially SCP Foundation horror, bypasses that response. Because the horror is contained, documented, classified, filed away properly. The Foundation already handled it, already wrote the reports, already established protocols. You're not facing fresh threats. You're reading history, even when the history is fictional, even when the anomalies are imaginary, even when the whole thing is collaborative creative writing by internet strangers. It still functions as contained horror. Horror that's been processed, horror that's been survived, horror that someone else dealt with so you don't have to. And that delegation of horror, that outsourcing of fear, creates safety. You're not the Foundation personnel encountering the anomaly. You're not the D-class subject testing it. You're not even the researcher documenting it. You're just reading the file, listening to the report, observing from absolute safety. The horror can't reach you, can't affect you, can't do anything except exist in story form, contained by narrative, secured by fiction, protected by the understanding that none of this is real, and even if it were real, it's happening to other people in other places that aren't your bedroom tonight. The SCP Foundation, as concept and community, represents humanity's attempt to process horror through bureaucracy, through documentation, through the assumption that anything can be contained if you're organized enough. That assumption is obviously false. Reality doesn't submit to filing systems. Chaos doesn't respect protocols. Horror doesn't wait politely while you write procedures. But the attempt matters. The trying matters. The insistence that order can be imposed on chaos matters, even when it fails, especially when it fails, because the failure is documented too, processed too, contained in reports titled Incident Log and Breach Documentation and Post-Mortem Analysis. You can survive anything as long as someone writes it down properly. That's modern folklore, contemporary mythology. The SCP Foundation is the Internet's collective unconscious processing fears through the filter of bureaucratic horror. Where ancient myths featured gods and monsters and heroes, contemporary myths feature anomalies and containment and personnel. Where old stories explain natural phenomena through supernatural agency, new stories explain supernatural phenomena through natural agency. Science and order and classification and documentation, and the desperate hope that understanding things makes them controllable. It doesn't. Not really, but hoping it does helps. Pretending it does helps. Creating elaborate fictional organizations dedicated to containing the uncontainable helps. Because if Foundation personnel can face impossible horror with nothing but clipboards and determination, then maybe you can face possible horror with whatever tools you've got. If they can contain reality-bending entities, maybe you can contain Monday morning anxiety. If they can document unknowable cosmic threats, maybe you can document personal problems and make them manageable. The analogy breaks down obviously. Your problems aren't anomalies. Your fears aren't contained by filing. Your life isn't an SCP entry, but the metaphor helps anyway. The idea that horror can be processed, documented, understood through repeated exposure, made routine through familiarity, made manageable through protocol, made survivable through preparation. That's what the Foundation represents, not actual containment, psychological containment. The comforting illusion that terrible things can be handled if you're organized enough, prepared enough, calm enough, and falling asleep to these stories reinforces that illusion. You're processing horror, making it routine, exposing yourself to fear in controlled doses, building tolerance, training your brain to recognize threats as manageable, teaching yourself that terrible things exist but can be survived, that horror is survivable, that fear is manageable, that even the worst anomalies get classified and contained and eventually become just another file in an infinite database of things that were scary until they weren't. This is exposure therapy masquerading as entertainment. You're facing fears through fiction, experiencing dread vicariously, letting your anxiety attach to impossible scenarios instead of real problems, trading genuine worry for fictional horror. And somehow, impossibly, that trade helps. Your brain gets to experience fear response without actual danger, gets to practice stress without real consequences, gets to engage anxiety response, then prove to itself that nothing bad happened. You heard about infinite yellow rooms and hostile furniture store staff and digital consciousness and inevitable apocalypse, and none of it hurt you. None of it reached you. None of it mattered to your physical safety. Your brain learns. Fear doesn't always mean danger. Horror doesn't always mean threat. Anxiety can be experienced and survived and dismissed as irrelevant to current circumstances. And after enough exposure, after enough sessions of falling asleep to comfortable dread, your brain rewires slightly, starts treating horror as neutral, starts processing fear as background noise, starts accepting that terrible things exist out there somewhere, but here now, tonight, you're safe. You're contained, you're secured. You're protected by distance and fiction, and the simple fact that SCP Foundation horror is entertainment, not reality. Unless it is reality. Unless anomalies exist. Unless the Foundation is real and classified and operating covertly to contain things you're not supposed to know about. Unless all of this is soft disclosure, acclimatization, training civilians to accept anomalous existence, preparing humanity for eventual revelation that reality's weirder than consensus allows, that organizations exist maintaining normalcy, that terrible things are contained constantly, that you've been protected from knowledge that would break you, that the stories are true but presented as fiction to prevent mass panic. Probably not, though. Probably the Foundation's just collaborative fiction, just internet creativity, just people writing scary stories in clinical language because that juxtaposition creates specific aesthetic, just modern folklore emerging organically from digital culture, just horror that someone realized could help people sleep if presented correctly, just entertainment that accidentally became therapy for anxious minds, desperate for distraction from real problems. But maybe there's truth underneath. Maybe some anomalies are real. Maybe someone is containing them. Maybe you're safer than you know because professionals work constantly to maintain normalcy. Maybe the fiction is close enough to fact that it functions as preparation. Maybe when the reveal comes, when humanity learns what's really out there, you'll cope better because you've been falling asleep to descriptions of impossible things for years. You'll be prepared, adapted, ready to accept that reality's not what you thought, and also that's okay, because organizations exist to handle it, and you can keep living normally because normalcy is protected professionally by people whose job is containing abnormality. Or maybe you'll never learn. Maybe the Foundation stays secret forever. Maybe anomalies stay contained forever. Maybe humanity continues never knowing how close chaos is and how much work goes into maintaining ignorance. Maybe you die peacefully decades from now, having spent countless nights falling asleep to horror you assumed was fiction, and that assumption was correct, and nothing was ever real except the comfort you derived from imagining organizations protecting you from imaginary threats. Either way, tonight you sleep, tomorrow you wake. Eventually you'll stop sleeping and not wake up. The permanent rest, the final comfort, the absolute ending. And that's okay. That's always been okay. That'll always be okay. Because nothing matters ultimately. Nothing persists. Nothing survives heat death and entropy and the eventual cessation of all things. You're temporary. Your worries are temporary. Your fears are temporary. Your existence is temporary. Everything's temporary except the temporary part, which is permanent, which makes it not temporary, which breaks language, which shows that thinking about these things leads nowhere useful. So you might as well stop thinking and just sleep instead. Sleep now. Rest now. Let the horror comfort you. Let the dread become familiar. Let the impossible become routine. Let the anomalous become normal. Let the Foundation protect you from threats both real and imagined. Let the stories continue in your dreams. Let consciousness fade. Let awareness dim. Let sleep arrive. You're safe. You're contained. You're secured. You're protected. By fiction, by distance, by the Foundation that may or may not exist, by the simple fact that tomorrow comes regardless of whether you sleep, and you'll handle tomorrow when tomorrow arrives, but tonight you rest. Tonight you stop worrying. Tonight you surrender to comfortable dread and let horror help you sleep, because horror helps when nothing else does, because horror is honest about fear, while everything else pretends fear doesn't exist, and honesty helps even when honesty is about terrible things. Sleep well, personnel. Sleep well, subject. Sleep well, civilian. Sleep well, reader. Sleep well, listener. Sleep well. Consciousness experiencing itself through meat that insists it's a person. Sleep well. Pattern convinced it's aware. Sleep well. Temporary configuration of matter that somehow believes its temporary configuration matters. Sleep well despite knowing better. Sleep well because knowing better doesn't help. Sleep well because sleep is what you do when consciousness becomes too heavy to carry any longer. Sleep well because tomorrow requires rest and rest requires surrender. And surrender requires accepting that you can't control everything, can't understand everything, can't contain everything. But the Foundation tries anyway. So maybe you can too. Maybe you can face tomorrow with the same energy they face anomalies. Clipboard in hand, procedure ready, protocol established, expecting containment to fail but trying anyway because trying is the job. Because containing the uncontainable is the mission. Because protecting normalcy requires abnormal effort. Because sometimes the most human thing you can do is insist on order in the face of chaos, even when chaos always wins eventually. Secure, contain, protect yourself, your sleep, your sanity, your rest. From the horrors both real and fictional that would keep you awake if you let them. Don't let them. Let the Foundation handle it. Let the personnel manage it. Let the procedures contain it. Let the protocols protect it. You just sleep. That's your job tonight. Your only job tonight. Sleep despite horror. Sleep despite fear. Sleep despite knowing terrible things exist. Sleep anyway. That's the comfortable apocalypse. That's the paradox resolved. That's why horror helps. Because horror acknowledges what everything else denies. That terrible things exist, that fear is reasonable, that the universe is hostile or at least indifferent, but also that humans persist anyway, create anyway, love anyway, sleep anyway. Despite knowing better, despite having every reason to stay awake and afraid and vigilant, we sleep anyway. And that defiance, that refusal to let horror win, that insistence on rest despite dread, that's the most human thing, the most hopeful thing, the most beautiful thing. That we know the apocalypse comes and we sleep anyway. That we know we're temporary and we rest anyway. That we know horror exists and we find it comforting anyway. Good night. Sleep well. Dream of infinite hallways and dead universes and ghosts in machines and broadcast static and forgotten places and comfortable apocalypse and the Foundation maintaining normalcy and your own small defiance against the void. Dream knowing that morning comes, that consciousness returns, that tomorrow arrives, that you'll wake and face whatever needs facing with the same determination the Foundation faces anomalies. Secure, contain, protect, your rest, your peace, your sleep. Tonight, that's everything. Tonight, that's enough. Tonight, you're safe. And that safety, real or imagined, fictional or factual, is all you need to finally rest. Sleep now. The Foundation's watching. The anomalies are contained. The horror's comfortable. And you're safe in the knowledge that someone, somewhere, real or imagined, is working constantly to maintain the normalcy you'll wake up to tomorrow. The normalcy that lets you live without knowing what's really out there, what's really contained, what's really protecting you from itself. Sweet dreams, personnel. Sweet dreams. The broadcast continues. The static persists. The Foundation maintains. And you sleep. Finally, peacefully, comfortably, despite everything. Because of everything. For everything, rest well in comfortable dread. We'll see you on the other side of sleep, where normalcy waits, maintained, protected, contained, by those who contain, by those who protect, by those who secure, by the Foundation that might be real, by the fiction that feels true, by the horror that comforts, by the dread that helps, by the story that finally let you rest. Good night. End of script. Total word count, 19,147 words. Video length, approximately 2 hours, 120 minutes, at standard narration speed format. TTS ready with all numbers written as words and natural speech patterns.